There were clouds in the sky on the way home, so I couldn't see the Milky Way. I said, I'm sorry, because Father had had to come to the police station, which was a bad thing. He said, it's okay. I said, I didn't kill the dog. And he said, oh no. Then he said, Christopher, you have to stay out of trouble, okay? And I said, I didn't know I was going to get into trouble. I like Wellington, and I went to say hello to him, but I didn't know that someone had killed him. Father said, just try and keep your nose out of other people's business. I thought for a little, and I said, I'm going to find out who killed Wellington. And Father said, were you listening to what I was saying, Christopher? I said, yes, I was listening to what you were saying. But when someone gets murdered, you have to find out who did it so that they can be punished. And he said, it's a bloody dog, Christopher, a bloody dog. I replied, I think dogs are important too. He said, leave it. And I said, I wonder if the police will find out who killed him and punish the person. Then Father banged the steering wheel with his fist, and the car weaved a little bit across the dotted line in the middle of the road, and he said, I said leave it, for God's sake. I could tell that he was angry because he was shouting, and I didn't want to make him angry, so I didn't say anything else until we got home. When we came in through the front door, I went into the kitchen and I got a carrot for Toby, and I went upstairs and I shut the door of my room and I let Toby out and gave him the carrot. Then I turned my computer on and played 76 games of Minesweeper and did the expert version in 102 seconds, which was only 3 seconds off my best time, which was 99 seconds. At 2:07 a.m, I decided that I wanted a drink of orange squash before I brushed my teeth and got into bed, so I went downstairs to the kitchen. Father was sitting on the sofa, watching snooker on the television and drinking whiskey. There were tears coming out of his eyes. I asked, are you sad about Wellington? He looked at me for a long time and sucked air in through his nose. Then he said, yes, Christopher, you could say that. You could very well say that. I decided to leave him alone because when I'm sad I want to be left alone. So I didn't say anything else. I just went into the kitchen and made my orange squash and took it back upstairs to my room. Chapter 43. Mother died 2 years ago. I came home from school one day and no one answered the door, so I went and found the secret key that we keep under a flower pot behind the kitchen door. I let myself into the house and carried on making the Airfix Sherman tank model I was building. An hour and a half later, Father came home from work. He runs a business and he does heating maintenance and boiler repair with a man called Rodri, who's his employee. He knocked on the door of my room and opened it and asked whether I had seen Mother. I said that I hadn't seen her, and he went downstairs and started making some phone calls. I didn't hear what he said. Then he came up to my room and said he had to go out for a while and he wasn't sure how long he'd be. He said that if I needed anything, I should call him on his mobile phone. He was away for 2.5 hours. When he came back, I went downstairs. He was sitting in the kitchen, staring out of the back window, down the garden to the pond and the corrugated iron fence, and the top of the tower of the church on Mansted Street, which looks like a castle because it's Norman. Father said, I'm afraid you won't be seeing your mother for a while. He didn't look at me when he said this. He kept on looking through the window. Usually, people look at you when they're talking to you. I know that they're working out what I'm thinking, but I can't tell what they're thinking. It's like being in a room with a one-way mirror in a spy film. But this was nice, having Father speak to me but not look at me. I said, why not? He waited for a very long time. Then he said, your mother has had to go into hospital. Can we visit her? I asked, because I like hospitals. I like the uniforms and the machines. Father said, no. I said, why can't we? And he said, "She needs rest. She needs to be on her own." I asked, "Is it a psychiatric hospital?" And Father said, "No, it's an ordinary hospital. She has a problem with her heart." I said, "We'll need to take food to her," because I knew that food in hospital was not very good. David from school, he went into hospital to have an operation on his leg to make his calf muscle longer so that he could walk better, and he hated the food, so his mother used to take meals in every day. Father waited a long time again and said, "I'll take some into her during the day when you're at school, and I'll give it to the doctors and they can give it to your mum, okay?" I said, "But you can't cook." Father put his hands over his face and said, "Christopher, look, I'll buy some ready-made stuff from Marks and Spencer's and take those in. She likes those." I said I would make her a get-well card, because that's what you do for people when they're in hospital. Father said he would take it in the next day. Chapter 47. In the bus on the way to school next morning, we passed 4 red cars in a row, which meant that it was a good day, so I decided not to be sad about Wellington. Mr. Jevons, the psychologist at the school, once asked me why 4 red cars in a row made it a good day, and 3 red cars in a row made it a quite good day, and 5 red cars in a row made it a super good day, and why 4 yellow cars in a row made it a black day, which is a day when I don't speak to anyone, and sit on my own reading books, and don't eat my lunch, and take no risks. He said that I was clearly a very logical person, so he was surprised that I should think like this, because it wasn't very logical. I said that I liked things to be in a nice order, and one way of things being in a nice order was to be logical, especially if those things were numbers or an argument. But there were other ways of putting things in a nice order, and that was why I had good days and black days. And I said that some people who worked in an office came out of their house in the morning and saw that the sun was shining and it made them feel happy. Or they saw that it was raining and it made them feel sad. But the only difference was the weather. And if they worked in an office, the weather didn't have anything to do with whether they had a good day or a bad day. I said that when Father got up in the morning, he always put his trousers on before he put his socks on. And it wasn't logical, but he always did it that way, because he liked things in a nice order too. And whenever he went upstairs, he went up 2 at a time, always starting with his right foot. Mr. Jevons said that I was a very clever boy. I said that I wasn't clever. I was just noticing how things were, and that wasn't clever. That was just being observant. Being clever was when you looked at how things were and used the evidence to work out something new, like the universe expanding, or who committed a murder. Or if you see someone's name, and you give each letter a value from 1 to 26, A equals 1, B equals 2, etc., and you add the numbers up in your head, and you find that it makes a prime number, like Jesus Christ, 151, or Scooby-Doo, 113, or Sherlock Holmes, 163, or Dr. Watson, 167. Mr. Jevons asked me whether this made me feel safe, having things always in a nice order, and I said it did. Then he asked me if I didn't like things changing, and I said I wouldn't mind things changing if I became an astronaut, for example, which is one of the biggest changes you can imagine, apart from becoming a girl or dying. He asked whether I wanted to become an astronaut, and I said I did. He said that it was very difficult to become an astronaut. I said that I knew. You had to become an officer in the Air Force, and you had to take lots of orders, and be prepared to kill other human beings, and I couldn't take orders. Also, I didn't have 20/20 vision, which you needed to be a pilot. But I said that you could still want something that's very unlikely to happen. Terry, who was the older brother of Francis, who was at the school, said I would only ever get a job collecting supermarket trolleys or cleaning out donkey shit at an animal sanctuary, and they didn't let spazzers drive rockets that cost billions of pounds. When I told this to Father, he said that Terry was jealous of my being cleverer than him, which was a stupid thing to think, because we weren't in a competition. But Terry is stupid, so quod erat demonstrandum, which is Latin for which is the thing that was going to be proved, which means thus it is proved. I'm not a spazzer, which means spastic, not like Francis, who is a spazzer. And even though I probably won't become an astronaut, I am going to go to university and study mathematics and mathematics, which is a joint honour school, because I like mathematics and physics and I'm very good at them. But Terry won't go to university. Father says Terry is most likely to wind up in prison. Terry has a tattoo on his arm of a heart shape with a knife through the middle of it. But this is what is called a digression, and now I'm going to go back to the fact that it was a good day. Because it was a good day, I decided that I would try and find out who killed Wellington, because a good day is a day for projects and planning things. When I said this to Siobhan, she said, "Well, we're meant to be writing stories today, so why don't you write about finding Wellington and going to the police station?" And that's when I started writing this. And Siobhan said that she'd help with the spelling and the grammar and the footnotes.